I'm not gonna lie. In fact, I would never lie to you on this channel. I found this to be a tough one for me to penetrate. As this film was unfolding, I was mentally making notes of things that I wanted to come back to and write about for my review. And somewhere around the third act, I realized that I had completely forgotten most of them because, if I'm being honest, I found the film kind of dull and frustrating. And not in the way that I think the film was intending to be frustrating. There's a phenomenon happening lately that I feel like we need to discuss. Maybe it's always been happening and I'm only now noticing it, where filmmakers lean into this appearance of engaging with controversy. They present films that look like they're about boundary-pushing themes or conversations that are meant to divide audiences or comment on societal fractures. I'd group After the Hunt in that lineage. Like, for instance, Eddington from earlier this year. It was marketed as something that would polarize people because of what it was dealing with. And in the case of After the Hunt, that subject is the interpersonal politics of student-teacher boundaries within an elite academic institution. At its core, the film is about Alma, played by Julia Roberts, a respected philosophy professor with a tight-knit circle of colleagues and students, including her close friend and fellow professor played by Andrew Garfield. It's revealed that Garfield's character engaged in some version of a sexual relationship with one of Alma's mentees, played by Ayo Edebiri. From there, things unfold as you'd expect, a he said, she said, with Garfield denying wrongdoing and Ayo, whose name is Maggie in the movie, escalating the matter through the university. Alma gets caught in the middle between a kind of old guard mentality that people make mistakes, but that doesn't mean you torch their entire life, especially the life of her friend, and her role as a professor, as a feminist voice in a male-dominated academic world. And on paper, that all sounds like the makings of a tense, fascinating drama. But the issue for me is that the film spends most of its runtime with characters orbiting around what they really mean, speaking in this poetic, evasive, overly intellectualized language. And look, as a writer myself, I get it. We're all told early on, don't let characters say exactly what they feel. But there's a threshold where that becomes performative, and this film crossed that line for me. Conversations turned into philosophical TED Talks about virtue ethics, peppered with references to Heidegger, Kierkegaard, Arndt, etc., and vague whataboutisms that amount to "this is why your generation is so f***ed," instead of letting actual human emotion cut through. The film constantly dances around its most interesting ideas like it's afraid to grapple with them head on. And there are genuinely compelling themes brewing here too, specifically the tension between old wave feminism, new wave feminism, and whatever form of feminism has emerged post-2015 in the era of social media, Me Too callouts, and institutional overhauls. The film keeps gesturing at that friction, but every time it gets close to something sharp, it retreats back into academic aloofness. Which brings me to Alma. Julia Roberts plays her like an alien observing human behavior from a distance, and I could never decide if that was a brilliant choice or completely miscalibrated. Half the time, she's impenetrable. She's cold, detached, guarded to the point that feels unnatural, and at one point, she literally asks her husband, played by Michael Stuhlbarg, if she's cold, and he basically confirms it that, yeah, she's often unreadable. She never really shows empathy, even when the situation clearly calls for it. It's like she's censoring herself, withholding every visible sign of interiority. Now, later in the film, there's a secret revealed, and I'm not going to spoil it here. It's something from her past, which could be read as the emotional root of why she's so closed off and why these events trigger such extreme self-sabotage throughout the rest of the movie. But even with that in mind, so much of her behavior felt disproportionate to what was actually unfolding in front of us. There's also a sort of subplot about her dealing with stomach ulcers. She's constantly in pain, secretly medicating herself, drinking alcohol, refusing to seek treatment or tell anyone for no real reason other than narrative symbolism, I guess. Honestly, her whole deal reminded me of something I'm always telling my girlfriend whenever we have arguments or disagreements, which isn't that often, but you know, it happens. I always tell her that it's useful for us to have a scale like you would find in a doctor's office. Like, are you at a 5 or an 8 out of 10 right now? Because this film has Alma's pressure cooker at an 8 emotionally, while the actual stakes, as presented, in my opinion, hover around a 5. Alma spirals like she's in some psychological thriller, but the scenario never earns that level of hysteria. I kept thinking throughout the movie that most of this could be solved with just one good old-fashioned honest conversation. If Alma and Maggie just sat down like human beings, not as representatives of feminism or as figures of an ideological discourse, much of this just dissolves. And also, that hypothetical conversation I'm imagining in my head has some real narrative heft to it that I wouldn't mind watching. It just feels like the film wants to engage with this generational divide, boomers, Gen X versus millennials and Gen Z, but it does it in these half-hearted, slightly patronizing gestures. Sometimes it really feels like the Simpsons joke, old man yells at cloud. There are moments where older characters basically say, in fancier language, kids these days don't know how good they have it. And every time that happened, I felt my eyes yearning to roll to the back of my skull. That lack of nuance is exactly what I was hoping Guadagnino would avoid in this film. I constantly kept feeling like the film is flirting with ideas and not investigating them further. We never get a real excavation of what actually happened between Andrew Garfield's character and Maggie. We only hear two conflicting accounts, and that's it. With that limited information, there's no meaningful moral dilemma to chew on. It's not asking, what would you do? It's asking, which side do you believe? And that, in my opinion, is much less interesting. Performance-wise, Julia Roberts has moments where that coldness cracks, and those are compelling, but I wish she had more to do rather than just self-destruct via baffling decisions like forging a prescription when she's a highly paid Ivy League professor with excellent healthcare. Andrew Garfield has the showiest arc. He gets to explode several times in this movie and play this arrogant professor who maybe crossed a line and now has to perform contrition without admitting guilt. Michael Stuhlbarg, as always, is a joy and continues to prove why he's one of the best character actors to ever do it. And Ayo Edebiri, who is someone I consider to be primarily a comedic actress, holds her own dramatically here. The score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross didn't always work for me. It leans into this academic, sterile mood with plinking pianos, drifting strings, and on paper, it matches the setting. But in practice, it often overpowered scenes where I just wanted silence or subtlety. Basically, there are times in this movie where the score is telling me to feel tension that the script wasn't earning. And visually, the cinematography is a bit of a mixed bag. There are shots where characters are pushed to the edges of the frame, leaving this awkward void of negative space that felt deliberate but just strange. And then there are these quiet, single-take camera moves that are technically impressive and invisible until you actually think about them after the fact. It's like the film oscillates between over-stylized and beautifully restrained, but never really fully commits to either. And all of this is kind of summing up my feelings about this movie. Luca Guadagnino is a filmmaker I'm largely ride or die for. Call Me By Your Name is easily in my top 100 films of all time. Suspiria blew my mind, and Bones and All, Challengers, and Queer show this fascinating ability of his to hop genres while still feeling authored by the same hand. But After the Hunt lands in this middle space for me. It's neither a disaster nor a triumph. It's more of a miss than a hit. I think I'm just tired of writers mistaking withheld emotion and vague dialogue for depth. There's a way to treat your audience with respect and let characters speak like people. There's a way to explore ideology without turning every exchange into a dissertation. Guadagnino seems interested in this culture clash of our moment, generational conflict, polarization, ideological rigidity, but I felt like I was supplying that reading more than the film was earning it. And all of this also makes me curious. Will international audiences resonate with this at all? Or is this a distinctly American academic cultural product? It's hard to say, but it feels very tailored to a specific US discourse bubble. Anyway, that's where I'm at with After the Hunt. It's a solid effort, some solid performances, a few moments of genuine craft, but overall, I'm lukewarm. But still, I'll be there for whatever Luca Guadagnino does next. But what did you guys think of After the Hunt? Am I way off base here? Is this film saying something more profound than I'm giving it credit for? Maybe it's one that I need to come back to in a couple years or so. Let me know down in the comments. And when you're done with that, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to be notified when new videos come out on this very channel. Go follow me over on Letterboxd so you can see what I'm watching, when I'm watching it. And I'll see you all next time.